So thanks for having me to Leah and Kavira and being our co-conspirators here in this workshop series. This is, I think you guys both know, we're tacked on to the Southwest Grass-Fed Livestock Alliance's long sort of drawn out business curriculum training called Bringing Meat to Market. And these are some additional resources that we consider part of that series that we've created specifically for and with Kavira's wintertime workshop series. And it's been such a joy to be doing that with them. And I am an independent, Valerie, I think I've seen you somewhere in the mix in the Zoom world, but just as a reminder, I'm an educator and consultant. I work directly with farms and ranches. And today I'm here wearing my SWGLA hat. I'm a program coordinator for SWGLA and have been in charge in creating this business training for them. And I am originally from Northern California, so historic land of the coastal Miwok. And I am here in Italy, which is funny. I've been creating a land acknowledgement for Italy. It's like, it's been, we think of the Romans, right? As Americans, we think of the Romans, but prior to the Romans, it was the Etruscans, and prior to the Etruscans, it was Celtic, and then afterwards, there's the Longobardi, and I'm up in the north, so there's a bunch of motion up here over the course of the years, and none of those people are necessarily considered, indigenous or non-indigenous over here in Europe. It's just so old that they all stole land from each other so many times over that it's just a big melting pot of conquest, really. So that's my land acknowledgement. I would love to hear y'all's, and then we can get started with your questions and get in dirty and share the tool. And I'd love to hear your land acknowledgement and then what animals you raise or are hoping to raise in the future if you're moving into new enterprises too, since we have multiple tools, and where you are.
Sure, I can start. I'm Valerie Norwood, and I'm living in Shoreline, which is north of Seattle, Washington. So that's where I've mostly grown up, but all my family's from New Mexico, and we have a cattle ranch in northeastern New Mexico. So I'm there some as well. Occasionally my dad's actually down there right now. So we have a traditional beef cattle ranch, and we're sort of entering that phase of, well, let's say I'm entering the phase of like, oh my goodness, we need to figure this out from some longer term. I kind of joke that I'm the family culture broker. And my background's in intercultural development and leadership. So it's a lot of fun. And so I'm learning a lot more about the industry and have a window of time to be more involved now as they're kind of considering like, what are scenarios and how do we make this enterprise viable? It's about 10,000 acres. And
how many head, Valerie?
Right now there's about 140 head.
Okay. And you run cow-calf?
Yeah, it's cow-calf. Yeah. And they've done a little bit of, occasionally we've done yearlings, but with the drought and all of that, it's kind of all in a pullback phase. But very much, in a place where the land needs a lot more regenerative care, and there's interest in that, particularly around erosion and so forth, but trying to figure out, people power and all of that. And one of the things that we did this last year was take cattle and keep ownership all the way to the grid. So we're not to this place yet doing direct marketing, but it's sort of one of the pieces that is being held as, what are all those options like you're talking about. And so I'm really here mostly as an observer because I'm still wrapping my head around all of it and trying to get a better understanding of where all the pieces fit. And then I have a cousin who's in Nebraska who is just starting out a goat business. And so she has some interest in this too from that realm. So here in this area where I'm in Seattle, it's the Duwamish people. It's the land that we're on currently. And then in northeastern New Mexico, the Kiowa is kind of where we are, up close to Oklahoma as well.
Cool, thank you. Feel free to, pass on your tools to your cousin.
Yes, I think I will. Whatever if I can help
in SWGLA in general. It's a pretty flexible boundary of what is considered the Northwest or the Southwest based on what we're doing and who we're interacting with. It's sort of a free love scenario here with these resources. So
yeah, and I think her hope
I
at
have
some point is
that.
to also be more involved. So in the Southwest. So we'll see.
Great, thank you for that.
Heather, do you want to share?
Yeah, I'd love to. Quick question, Val. You said you took your cattle to the grid. What does that mean? That's a new term for me.
Well, Olivia might probably still be able to explain it better, but so traditionally we've sold them as either yearlings or we put them in a grow lot and sold them, but this time we kept them all the way and sold them directly to the two of the bigger processors. And so they were kept in a grow lot for a period of time, and then we just retained ownership the whole way through until they were sold. And so like right now I'm looking at some futures for a sale in October, for this next October, to kind of see what the price might be for that. But
I've never heard that term either, Heather. Through the grid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Val. That's good to know. I was sort of guessing that's what you meant, but thanks for
Yeah,
that.
basically retain the ownership all the way through, and then yep.
So my name's Heather and I am in Montana. So very, broad definition of Southwest. I am in the Musselshell River Valley, which is the traditional hunting grounds of several tribes. But I think that one of the most notable ones is the Apsalika or Crow tribe that use this pretty consistently. I definitely would like to research that more. I talked to one Northern Cheyenne woman to ask her opinion, and she said, oh, that's Crow territory. So I'm kind of sticking with that for now, but I do feel like other tribes like the Blackfeet and the Cheyenne, and probably a handful of others came through here to hunt because it was such a rich valley for bison. And so it would be the kind of place that seasonally a lot of tribes would come to. So we are about an hour northwest of Billings. That's our closest big city. And we have been here, well, my husband's family has called this home for 4 generations. And my husband and I came up to help run the ranch in 2014 and officially took over management of the ranch in 2017. And we've been slowly building a direct to consumer side of the business. We're fairly small compared to other Montana ranches and our neighbors. We were only about 1,800 acres, which means that as a cow-calf operation at our max, we had about 70 pairs. With the drought last summer, we sold 80% of our cows. And so it was time to really pivot and think about what are we gonna do to keep this place running and alive. We had been over the last 5 years growing up that direct to consumer piece. We had started with 1 steer, then 2, then 3, then 5, and then 10 this year. So we decided to focus more on that. And in addition, we bought some Icelandic sheep and we got a handful of pigs. I think that the pigs is just going to be a single run. It's like a little too much to have all 3 right now, but I think the sheep will complement the cattle and stay part of our operation for a while. So we are running these multiple species now, and at this point only doing the beef direct to consumer. Our model for the last several years has been to just sell it by the 1/8, quarter, half, or whole, but I'm looking at diversifying that and selling, I don't know, it's such a small number, I don't really know if I could sell by the cut, but I was thinking of putting together like some beef bundles where customers that don't have room for 50 pounds of beef could buy maybe 10 pounds, and it would include a mix of a few things. You know, I could have maybe 5 or 6 types of bundles, and I think that would be easier for me to manage on the inventory side, as well as the fact that we just don't have that many animals. So I can't reliably have all the cuts in stock all the time. So I'm maybe getting down in the weeds of our business, but that's kind of where we're at.
Super helpful.
Okay, good. I'm looking at, what I did last summer was a lot of farmers markets, and all I had to sell at the farmers market last year was ground beef because we had a lot of extra of that. But this coming summer, I want to have some other packages, but I'd also like to just start doing like email newsletters because I'm so close to Billings. I can do a once a week delivery to Billings and have people buy these bundles. And so that's where my mind has been currently, in trying to make this a sustainable business that will actually generate an income and not just break even, which is, I think, what we did last year.
Which is not bad.
Sure. But that didn't include, like, I didn't pay myself. So, you know, my labor was all,
Oh yeah, still not bad.
okay. All right.
Yeah, feel good. I have wonderful news for you, and also for you, Val, potentially, as you're planning for the future. First of all, it's great that you both are here at such early stages of your direct marketing moment, pre and early, you know, respectively. Because I can't stress it enough how important just the record keeping aspect of this tool is. So if nothing else happens, especially for you, Val, playing around with finishing, you know, and I assume you're in sort of full care relationships with grazers, and so knowing the performance that they are able to port to your animals comes from good record keeping. And we built this because we find that most people run their businesses based on like an exemplary animal that they take some numbers off of, and then they run with that for a year or 5 or 15 until they radically change, until the weather radically changes and they have to change their forage, or they move locations, or, you know, maybe when they move processors, but usually not. And so just, if nothing else, keeping track of your harvests, this tool will put you so far ahead of the game in terms of understanding your business. And I mean, I think I beat this dead in my presentation, but I mean, really, I don't, you know, the other purpose of this is just for you to get numbers for yourself and move away from what the industry says and know what your operation and your animals do over time. And those are the two things that I say. If you take nothing else away, use it as a sketchboard for your harvests, and we will be thrilled. And I will consider that a radical success for both of your businesses and each of you individually as entrepreneurs. But the cool news is, if this is a model that Val interests you, and Heather, it's perfect timing for you, is as of today, we have just finished what we're calling the CSA planning build out of this tool. And so in the next week, we're going to upload the exact version that you see with an extra tab that allows you to build bundles and manage inventory. And it's something we've been working on for, I don't know, like just lazily, like 8 months or something. But I mean,
Olivia, can you repeat that? Because my internet just froze for like the critical piece there.
Oh, the critical piece. Sorry. Yes. The critical piece is that we've just built this exact tool with a CSA planning tab for building bundles and to play with composing bundles and managing inventory off of your animals, either hypothetical animal or everything you've harvested to date, and then knowing how to break those down into a box, and then knowing what you're going to have left over in based on cut type. So super exciting tool, because it's what everybody has a hard time understanding how to forecast. And everybody that's small and is dabbling in just this style of purchasing, or is it exactly the stage that this Heather is at, or is doing this plus farmer's market and like a restaurant, you know, how do you manage your inventory knowing what's going to come off your animals, and then split it up between a mixed box product and how many you're going to sell and what are you going to have left over and how much you're going to make in profit. So exciting. And I'll let you both know when that gets uploaded, but it's going to be in the next week or so. Okay, so from here, I would like to open up to you all to understand how you want to use your time. We have 40 minutes. We can open up the tool and screen share it. My idea for this session was we can talk, we can hang out, we can open up the tool and you guys can dictate to me maybe an individual animal and its numbers, and we can populate it in the tool and watch the numbers change and flick forward. I'd also love to hear if in the last few weeks you've been able to play around with it a little bit. And so if you have, then we could also have you guys screen share maybe, or just ask questions, whatever feels like the best use of your time and the most comfortable. So obviously it's a small group.
Well, I did play around with it, excuse me, and I had written down some questions.
Okay.
So,
should we start with those?
yeah, does that work for you, Val? I don't know
I
if you
think
had.
that's great because, yeah, I mean, I fiddled with that a little bit, but it's all in a sense make believe, you know, because then my hope would be to be able to have grass finishing and traditional, so we can kind of look at the benchmarks and the differences and all that.
Awesome.
So if you want to lead the way on that, Heather, you know, whatever you have to offer is helpful for me as I'm kind of navigating that.
Excellent. Okay. So I had written down like cuts and weights for one of the animals last year that we sold in bulk boxes, and then one of the animals this year. So certainly didn't do everyone, but had some numbers that I could put in. The
Cool.
number I don't have though is the live weight
weight.
of my animals. Yeah.
I know.
How do I get that?
So here's what happens. Either your processor has a scale and weighs the animal pre-harvest.
Okay.
Common, also not common. Totally normal that they do not have that capacity and do not do it. In that instance, we do go for an estimate. Obviously, some ranchers do invest in an on-farm scale. They're expensive. I've seen it as an investment that people make once they're at a certain production level, obviously, and usually when they're in pigs or sheep, and it's just a little bit easier to manage, or they're a major, finishing operation. So just know that you don't know, and try and estimate to your best, your best of the best you can.
Okay.
And obviously, it's a ratio we like to know, but many people are estimating. Many people like using this tool are estimating. So.
Right, and it's not going to impact my pricing, right? It's just going to give me a piece of data that right now I just don't have.
Yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
what people get really hung up on is that ratio. And what I really care about is hot carcass to red meat yield, because that's where all of the variability and subjectivity is in carcass shrink, which is like a blanket term for loss at any stage along the way. It doesn't mean shitty processor. Carcass loss can happen in all sorts of different places along the way. It can be on the cutting table. It can be in the cooler temperature. It can be the amount that you dry age. All those things are technically referred to as carcass loss. It's what disappears, right? It's also dependent on the actual, slaughter drop, like the weight of the organs and the hide and the head and the viscera. So what I care about is what you get back, and people get really fixated on this hot carcass weight percentage, dressing percentage. It's like, that doesn't really tell you anything. It's not true. It does tell you more about your production methodologies to a certain extent, but it doesn't tell you what I know about, which is what happens when you're trying to sell the meat, right? And so it's a ratio. The reason that we emphasize red meat yield and sellable product, which includes all the stuff that everybody thinks is waste, like bones and fat, is because your same dollar investment is in those pieces. And so if you could turn that around into revenue, that's where you're going to see performance on your animals from a direct meat marketing perspective. From a production perspective, folks all day are going to talk to you about your dressing percentage. It's like, that's fine. That's a metric. Okay. But we're focusing moving forward from hot carcass, and really maximizing what you get out of everything that comes back to you once the thing is cut up.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. What about entering value added products? I didn't see that on the sheet, but maybe I missed it.
We didn't build it into cattle.
Okay.
And it's something that I realized that we could have done in this CSA build out, but I realized too late. So what you're going to do, it's quite easy. It's a bummer that it's not in there, but it is sort of less frequent, and that's why it didn't occur to us in this first build out. I will note the caveat is that we took this tool to a whole other level in the successive years after building it for SWGLA. We, meaning me personally and my colleagues at Bernoulli Finance, who also teach a bunch of our SWGLA courses, and at our own expense and for our own work, we built it out to be a much more complicated tool that includes value-added product on every species and includes 9 species all in one spreadsheet, and includes a calculation of your gross revenue assigned into various different sales channels. So if you're selling to multiple wholesale channels with different pricing, and a direct-to-consumer channel like a farmer's market, and your cost of goods sold in that market, and your gross and your net profit potential. So the little pin that I'm putting is that I have something way more complicated that does everything if you ever want to see it. But this tool is nice to have too on the docket, one that's free and available to everybody via SWGLA membership, but unfortunately it doesn't have the VAP. The simple workaround is you take that true cost, that true average cost per pound that is calculated. Here, let me screen share real quick.
Let me make sure do you have the permission to? Let me just make sure it's turned on.
I don't, yeah.
Oh yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, hold on. I don't even see my, oh, here we go. I didn't see my correct screen.
Sorry, my video's off. My internet's pretty bad. It's easier for me to hear you all when it's off. So.
You're good, Leah. Okay, so in our margin calculator, this full cost per pound of sellable product is what you really care about. And again, what we're doing here is getting away from a calculation of your cost that is taken by dividing your hot carcass weight by your total processing fees, which is what everybody does. Like, I paid X to get this thing cut up. This is my carcass weight, and here's my price per pound, my cost per pound, which doesn't take into account the cost of production of the animal, nor B, take into account that your hot carcass weight, if you cut up your animal, is not what you get back. It is not the number of pounds that you get back. So most, the simple calculation that everybody does is like, it cost me $1,000 to cut it up. I got back 500 pounds in hot carcass weight. My cost is $2 per pound, which is not true, because you did not get back your hot carcass weight. You got back a different weight. Is that part clear? Why you got back a different weight? Everybody knows that already, right? Okay. So that's where we get this full cost per pound of sellable product. That includes bones, fat, and skin, and anything from the slaughter drop that you decide to take home. The reason that it includes that is because we're trying to impress upon you that that is sellable product. The processor might consider it waste. The market considers it low value or negative value. We consider it something that you have the entire investment in your animal already in. And so if you took out bones and just divided by your red meat yield, you would have a higher full cost per pound. If you just counted the actual cuts you got back and none of the bones and none of the fat, you'd have a much higher per pound cost. which is, something else to think about. But for now, okay, it's not divided by hanging weight. It's divided by what you actually take back off of that animal. For a value-added product, Heather, you would just add the per pound processing cost that it takes to make your sausage or whatever onto this dollar amount that you see here. So if it's $1 to make sausage or whatever you're going to make, your full cost per pound of that cut and that value-added product would be $5.21 in that scenario. So it's easy to do in your head. Unfortunately, it's not built in here, and I apologize for that.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I guess for that, I can't put that in my like per cut metrics down below, but I guess would the goal be then to say, all right, that's the cost of the sellable product. Then I add in what they charged me to produce it. And then I put on top of that, whatever percentage profit I want to make.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Yeah, it's just this number right here is going to be wrong. It's going to be $1 cheaper, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And so, we send locked versions. I can send you an unlocked version also so you can edit. You're not going to build in a VAP column, but you could be able to just edit that cell so that you're manually populating where it's coming from, for example. I don't necessarily encourage a bunch of editing. I would just like make an extra saved copy, play around with that a little bit, something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Let me know if you want to unlock copy. I'm happy to send it to you.
Okay. I think I could just do it in my head and come up with an idea. And
it's, it's a bummer it's not in here. It's not that hard, Yeah.
Is there like a margin percent and profit to aim for? Like
great
if you
question.
go, huh?
That's a great question.
Okay.
So if you're selling direct, which you are, so we've got a 0 in this distributor reseller desired margin, right? The general approach that I take, which is not going to be a fun answer for you to absorb, is that what we like to do is not teach a standard percentage, but teach a holistic look at your financials overall. So what that means is understanding the costs that you have in your product, your base unit costs. So your cost of production on the animals and your cost of post-production, processing, value-added, packaging, everything to get to that unit steak or that unit chub. We care about you understanding that. That calculation happens in analysis like this. What we also care about is you knowing what makes the ranch run, which happens for you right now in all of your Excel, but in the hopeful near future in your QuickBooks software, looking at all of the other categories that go into your overhead, right? And playing between the knowledge of those two. And so because everybody's ranch context and overhead and staffing and land ownership situation and acreage is very unique, I don't ever suggest a percentage margin across the board that everybody should adhere to, because it also is not just about your overhead that you need to cover with your ranch activities. It's about the variety in your enterprises. So if your beef enterprise meat marketing is only giving you 10% average across the board margin, but you've got a killer pork situation and you're selling high dollar value pork in a metro environment where people are just super hungry for it, and you've got an acceptable markup that you're slotted into a farmer's market with prices that feel appropriate for the market, but you're making 50% across the board on that pork, then the pork can kind of carry the beef a little bit, right? And that's a totally unique situation for every person. That's easier to play with when you're small. That thinking makes more sense when you're small, obviously. Val, somebody like you, sure, you're going to try and establish probably in a single enterprise situation a margin that's going to feel good. But then even in a Val situation, what my suggestion would be is to go for a diversified strategy in your market and not just say, I'm going to sell it all direct or I'm going to sell it all to a wholesaler, but, finding a middle ground of a mixed approach between those strategies, because 140 pairs is still not a ton. Imagine you started finishing all that, it's still not a ton of product that you're unloading. If you finished all of that yourself, I mean, even in grazing lease agreements, but took on the marketing of it all yourself, it's still not a ton of product. And so you'd want to go after direct to consumer and wholesale and to create a stable environment. And we have a webinar in the Swigla series that's specifically about that strategy and building that strategy for yourself. It's called Sales Strategy. And just so you know, Val, because I can't remember which webinars you've been on or where I've seen you in my little Zoom box, there is a set of 2 different webinars, an overview, and then a separate calculator for cost of production, which you should check out for determining everything before it gets slaughtered, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. I do need to look at that because for sure.
That one is based on a tool that was created by the Wallace Center specific to the Midwest, and then we tweaked it for the Southwest, but we only tweaked it in the example numbers. None of the rest of the tool is different. It's just the example numbers might feel funny to you in terms of like, even just like, like production values on the forage side,
right.
Like you're in hay because it's a totally different system. And so,
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. I'll flip that. Yeah, because that was my question. If the cost of production up here in 9, is that full, including overhead and operations for the live weight production cost?
So that's a great question also. I do not adhere to the theory of putting in a percentage allocation of overhead. It is what Ranching for Profit teaches, for example. It is what some enterprise analysis folks in Extension teach. That goes back to that holistic financial understanding of your business. I feel pretty strongly that we do that through financial statement analysis. That per pound cost should include everything else. If you have dedicated production labor, it should include it as well. If you've just got like a ranch manager and he gets a salary or she gets a salary, then, you would parse that out, that time that he or she is spending on production, and put that in there as an estimate. What we really care about is all the direct variable costs. So everything else that is really going into that finished animal. If you can't really easily parse out labor, then don't kill yourself doing it. Just include that as part of overhead. We can have a whole conversation, a dorky accounting conversation about methodologies for analysis that include overhead allocation or not. But that's my approach is, let's teach financial statement review. Let's teach a big picture vision of what is happening in the ranch, and like learn these muscles about all the other categories that are in the overhead, not just overhead and a random percentage. Because what happens is people like decide they're going to do a 10% allocation and then they forget about it. And then they'll end up with that they're in the red at the end of the year, and they don't know why, because they built their pricing based on an allocation that has nothing to do with their own understanding of what's actually coming in and out of the business. Even though it might be more static than feed pricing, it's still, if you don't get it and you just decide an allocation of a percentage that you get off the internet and you set your pricing based on that cost, based on that overhead percentage, and then you don't understand whether you're making money or not, it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out. So
right. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful.
I hope I'm not coming off as like wishy-washy, but it's really a much more in-depth learning process to learn how to read your financial statements and also do cost and price analysis alongside of it. That isn't super easy.
Right.
It's like, you gotta get in there and get dirty.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool.
And then, you know, this is a pared down version of understanding these costs, right? You know, processing costs, including your cryo and label. In the super complex version, we give you 1,000,000 rows to input 1,000,000 different post-production costs, because there sometimes are, including transport and, you know, additional marketing costs. So this is a simple version to get people excited, hopefully excited about understanding the base costs that they have in their animals in a way that is not just based on hot carcass weight, you know, total processing bill divided by hot carcass weight and then calling it a day.
Olivia, one thing that you've mentioned is that the offal is sort of a free bonus.
Yeah.
But on my most recent butcher invoice, they actually charged us for the heart, liver, tongue, and kidney. And I think they vacuum packed it, and they did not vacuum pack the bones though. They put them in boxes, in bags and boxes, and then they labeled it USDA. So that's another, like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do with that. But so I guess that's a side point to saying, how do I enter in the fact that they charged me? It basically was like $1 a pound for the heart, tongue, liver, kidney.
Yeah. So what we do is spread that across the whole cost of the carcass. So the total for your offal, let's say it's $20 total. In pig, it's easier because it's more standard. This is a variable thing from processor to processor on cattle. And pig, it's much more standard. And so we built that in on the head buyback, because oftentimes if you're selling to restaurants, people are often asking for the head. And so you're usually paying the processor for your head. So it's built in the pig version. It's not built in here. But say you paid $20 for all of that offal, divide that by your hot carcass weight, and that's your additional per pound, because it's going to be like 0.02 cents overall. So you divide, you spread it across the whole carcass, and so your $1 processing costs here are going to be $1.02 instead. And then you know that you got that cost reflected in the processing.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have, so in the past when we had gotten bones, they were all like individually vacuum packed. Do you have any idea? Oh no.
You're harvesting custom exempt or USDA right now?
USDA. Hold on, Microsoft wants to auto update. Let me tell it to stop and go away. Okay. So yeah, it's USDA, and they had vacuum packed all the bones, but this last time, like I said, it's bags and boxes. And I feel like I can't actually sell that to people for like human food, but maybe
no, you can. I mean, you need, I mean, technically you need to be repackaging it. You should talk to them about it. You know, okay. They don't have to cryovac it. I have had I've seen plenty of USDA processors just throw bones at people in all sorts of different containers. And I would just be very polite and open and gentle about asking them, like, hey, you know, last time we got it cryovac and this time it's in bags and boxes. I was just curious about what it's going to be moving forward and what the thinking behind that is. Is it what's easiest for you all? Is there a way that I can come in and help repackage? Like ideally for you, you go there at pickup and transfer those bags and boxes into what feels best for you. That would be ideal. They may not have the space for you to do that. Technically, paper wrapped is fine. And if they write their bug, if they have their bug stamp on the back, on the outside of the box, this is a question for a USDA processor. I think it's legal for them to give it to you as long as the bug is stamped on the thing. For you to resell, it's not so much what the transport package is, it is what you're selling in. And I think the USDA or FSIS wants you to sell in paper or cryo, but paper is fine. And so in but in that sense, you know, if you're selling direct to consumer, it doesn't need necessarily that USDA bug on it anyway. A reseller needs the bug shown on the package. The bug is the stamp.
Okay.
We call it a USDA bug.
Yeah, they just wrote on it with like a Sharpie USDA.
Yeah. I would
So-
just ask them about it, you know.
Okay.
And what would be ideal for you would be repackaging it on site. That's probably not super realistic, but if I were you, once you kind of wrap your head around what you want to do with it, what you should be doing is taking that time upon coming back and repackaging it the way you need it to be in that moment, so that you have an easy workflow. You pick it up, you bring it in to a cool storage situation, even if it's not refrigerated, and you repackage it as quickly as possible and what's going to make sense for you to sort through, which might still be boxes, but it might be boxes in ways where you're breaking it out into like femur bones and marrow bones. And that's also something they could probably do for you with a little bit of conversation. And just question asking, like, do you think it would be possible for you to split up the bones into, you know, X and Y? Are you getting the bones processed in any particular way? Are you cross-cutting for marrow bones or anything like that?
Yeah, so they gave us two kinds. They had like these big meaty ones that were basically like cross-cut shanks, although some are small. And those were all cryo packed, and they labeled that bones, soup bones.
Yeah.
And then what's in those bags in the boxes is more like marrow bones, just really stripped down, no meat on them, things that would be like a good bone broth or dog treat.
So whole bones, though.
Yeah, I mean they chunked them, so they're like 4 to 5 inch chunks.
Okay.
I mean, so I could wrap them in paper, I guess. That seems reasonable. I just thought I had to actually, even at like the farmer's market, have the USDA stamp on everything I was selling.
I mean, that's a good question to figure out from your processor if they could do it differently. And it's okay if it's paper, right?
Yeah.
But I doubt they're going to do that for all 400 pounds of bones, you know, whatever it is. 200, 160, whatever it is, you know, like however many head you've taken at a time. But it's worth asking, you know.
Okay.
And Heather, just as a side note, the one thing that I'm doing right now is I purchased a whole beef through somebody else that's grass finished, just so I can be the consumer end of it as well. Nice. And that's an interesting process. But thinking of bones, one of the incentives, if you purchased a whole beef, and then on my end, I've divvied up shares between family and friends, there were a bonus of getting bones. And so I did actually get a bunch of bones in brown bags. So, yeah. And that was a direct to consumer. So, I got my regular fancy sealed stuff, but then, she just had in there several brown bags of bones. And there were a couple different kinds. Some were plastic bag that were rib chunks. And then there was some higher quality, like cannon bones that were larger and nicely vacuum sealed. But then a bunch that were either smaller, like you're describing, or some look like, I don't know, knuckle bones, or just, kind of soupy type bones, not the crosscut shank. So they're not as much meat maybe as that. Anyway, but that was just kind of interesting to receive as part of that incentive package, and has been great. So we use it for soup, we use it for the pup, all kinds of different things. But
and that was a USDA processor, not a custom.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I think it's probably in that sense, like, you're fine in that scenario. I would be a little bit more nervous about it in the farmer's market setting. And so I would, Heather, as much as you can anticipate on a single harvest what you want the packaging to look like, and isolate out the bones that you want to be selling at the farmer's market, and, go into your process saying, hey, can you break out 50 pounds of just, simple cross-cut marrow bones and put them in packages, in 2-pound packages in paper with a label, and see what they say, or, you know, think through what you ideally the product is, and then work backwards based on the weird faces that your processor makes when you start talking about, you know, go in with like a bunch of different options, like, and just so you feel protected in that more visible scenario, you know. They're probably banking on the fact that they've given it to you. I mean, they need to have the actual stamp on it, but otherwise, like, they're probably banking on the fact that it's not that big of a deal, and you just want to follow it through all the way. You know, you don't have to have USDA, you know, processed meat to be selling in that scenario. There's workarounds, but, you know, obviously it's easier for you if you're not trying to work around the illegalities of certain minor techniques, and you can just feel safe, you know. But see if you can say, hey, give me half in a paper bag and give me these cuts in this, and like, tell me if you're going to charge me for it. And, you know, so.
Yeah, thank you.
So more questions, Heather, that can guide us, or should we?
Yeah, let me look at my list. It's a little messy. So do you have, as far as like when I was putting in what I was going to charge for all these cuts, I have tried to look around at what others are doing in our market, but do you have a good reference chart for grass-fed beef cut prices?
It's totally based on your market. It's just cold research.
Okay.
You can look at the grass-fed index on USDA. It is an index, right? It is a set of prices that don't give you anything relative to what you can get in your specific market. So the way that I like to do this is to visit multiple farmers markets and gather pricing from multiple producers. I look at not just grass finished, but also grass-fed, grain finished. I look at other products that are perceived as similar on the market. So maybe they're just organic beef, right? Maybe they're non-local grass-fed coming from Uruguay or Australia, you know, inside of like a Whole Foods scenario where there are, you know, major volume savings. I look online as a better index than like a USDA price index. I look at, you know, online consumer sources of grass-fed beef, whether that's in your region or nationally. I look at both. And I go into the market, the local supermarket that has grass-fed beef, whether it's local or not, and the local like bougie retail market, and get the full spectrum. Obviously, you're going to be most concerned with like the direct competitors in the directly most similar market, but you still want to know where you fall based on that that spread. That's how I go about pricing research.
Thank you. That's helpful. Sounds
And
kind of
CSA, other folks offering beef bundles. Other folks in your region offering bison bundles. Like, that's from a user's perspective, it's a comparable protein, right? And so from a market perspective, it might have a totally different market rate, but from an eater's perspective, like, I'm going to think about what I'm spending on my protein. If I'm sort of a regular eater, if I'm a super involved, super informed eater, I'm going to know more that the value of lamb on the market is higher. So I'm going to pay more for my lamb, even though for my body, it's a protein source. And for my family planning, it's a protein source. But so I would look at other proteins in your region as well, just so you get, you know what an eater is thinking about when making that judgment call, you know.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
It's kind of, in doing my bulk beef, I did some of that research, and it's really, interesting to see how much it ranges, even in Montana. And
Oh,
there's
interesting, yeah.
people doing $6 a pound all the way up to like $12 a pound. So like
Wow.
double. And so I don't know what drives people to want the $12 versus the $6 and, you know, how to fall in there. There's I
Sure.
guess,
Well,
knowing,
the first step is also knowing your cost, right?
yeah,
So the two routes and the sales strategy workshop goes into this. The two routes of determining our price are market-based research and cost-based research. And we need both to come up with our price, because we can't just base it on what the market will bear, because we may or may not cover our cost of production. Cost of production in that sense, meaning all the way to the package, you know, cost of production and post-processing. And we can't just charge what the market or what covers our cost, because the market might not, you know, might not hold. And so we might need to rethink our production style, if that's true, or even our enterprise selection. If we're going to produce meat for $11 a pound and everything on the market is going at $6 a pound, and we're going to lose $5 a pound on every pound that we sell, then we can't be in that enterprise, basically. So you're at the right place for understanding the cost side, you know. And there's something to be said for both understanding how you can eke out the most margin from your market based on what others are doing. And on the flip side, really knowing how to answer the question in a sales situation about why is your beef that high? What is in that price? And having an elegant, streamlined, well-practiced, well-rehearsed answer that tells your story in a beautiful way when you're put on the spot. Because no customer likes to be told that, well, it's just higher quality. I mean, I've seen, my husband's a producer, and I've seen him act like a total dipshit in that scenario, just being like, well, that's, you know, that's the market rate because it's higher quality. This example was olive oil, and I was like, that is dumb answer. Like, tell the story, dude. Like, what? You're just gonna like make the weird face and be like, oh, well, that's what it's worth? Like, and of course, the person walked away. It's not like that was a convincing like sales argument. Like, he was just like, that's what it is, lady. Like, that's what it is, you know. So that's an opportunity to tell your story, even though it feels like, oh, I need to defend myself against the big guys. It's actually a brand storytelling moment, you know.
excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
My last question is kind of a small one, but I think kind of important. When I was putting my cuts in, I noticed that you have a lot of different cut names, different types of cuts. And then when I go to like Google cuts, there's so many different options that come up. So what is your favorite reference chart for cut names and styles?
Your processor's cut sheet. That is my favorite, because you're never going to get out of the variation. And these cuts came from my partner in crime in developing the series with Swigla, who is a lifelong supply chain beef specialist, meat cutter, and butcher, who has worked in retail and in middle supply chain all across the country. And so he has like a decent understanding of the variation for a retail, as in like store ready, you know, interpretable set of cuts. It's also coming off of like, you know, a more academic approach to meat cutting. So some of these names you'll see in here because they're what you learn if you study meat science in school, and you learn how to break down a carcass as a meat cutter in meat science curriculum. You'll see more frequently these names, which is like the national standard. I forget the name of the book of all the different meat cuts. You know, you can get the big book. I mean, I should know the name of that book, but I haven't studied meat cutting. I think about it all the time. I think about going back to school for meat science. But you should feel totally free to change the names. These are just, they don't mean anything on here. You know, they were just, I just had Nathan actually do the whole cutout. And so start with your processor's standard cut sheet, and then get educated, like explore, take in all of your hours of downtime, which don't exist, you know, explore other avenues for eking out value on various different cuts, right? Go to classes, go to workshops, learn about butchery yourself in all of the avenues that you can, so that you can then come back to your processor and say, hey, you know, I have been talking to a restaurant who wants Delmonico's, and can you cut them for me? And then find out that Delmonico is the same name for a, you know, boneless ribeye. And I would just encourage you to continue down that path of self-education about butchery, and not sweat it in here, because what you care about is at least starting with what your processor wants to do as a standard cut sheet, and then talking to your customers, understanding what your market might ask for, to then expand upon that standard cut sheet and start cutting the animal slightly differently to eke out more dollars. Because that is an approach, you know.
Okay.
Eke out more dollars based on what people want, based on what the market wants to buy, based on different sorts of cuts that your butcher is not going to readily break down for you, but will at the same price with a nice conversation once you ask for it, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we are at our time here with you ladies. But I would welcome, you know, I welcome continuing conversation about this. Valerie, if you start using it in a year from now, send me an email with your questions. Like, I'm super available for all of these, for ongoing questions about, you know, these tools. And I'm gonna stop my share real quick. So
Olivia, when will we get the like CSA bundle option that you've just created?
So like I said, I think it's going to go online next week.
Okay.
And I can just shoot you a quick email, let you know when it's up, Heather.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, if you want, Olivia, I could send everyone who registered the update if you want to just touch base with me.
That would be awesome. And
Cool.
here, just so you guys both have it, my email's in the chat again. And so Leah, I'll let you know when we have, let me just make a note that I'll let you know when we upload the CSA tool. And you'll see it come through on the Swigla announcements as well. Like, if you guys follow Swigla at all, like on social media or in our newsletter, then you'll see that announcement come out sometime in the next few weeks anyways. Yeah.
That sounds great. Wonderful. All righty. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you
nice
coming.
Meeting all of you.
Nice to meet you both as well. And feel free to reach out. And thanks to Leah and Kavira for hosting us.
Yes, thank you. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye now.